sorry that my story will be a bit chaotic, but I'm starting in parts. Part 1. They never chose me. Why? You might think this sounds like some overblown television drama, but for me it was raw reality. No amount of success, no amount of distance, no number of years could erase what it felt like to be the invisible one, the one who kept paying while others kept taking. And no matter how much I wanted to forget, the memories and the truth kept clawing their way back. My name is Emily Hart. I am 33 years old. On paper, I am a success story, the founder and CEO of a biotech company that has just secured a $35 million government contract. That number is impressive. Investors call me a visionary, and my colleagues treat me like a leader. But in the eyes of my own family, I have never been that person. To them, I was never a daughter, never a sister, never a woman to be respected. I was, and always have been, a wallet. I flew home for my birthday. Not for a party, there wasn't one. I came home with fragile hope of spending a quiet evening with people who, I once believed, loved me. The house looked the same as it always had. The faded yellow paint peeling off the siding, the porch steps groaning under my weight, the old swing swaying lazily as if it still carried the echoes of my childhood. Under the front window, carved into the wood, I saw the initials of my sister Caitlin and me scratched there when we were young. A faint scar on the house, a reminder of a bond that had long since shattered. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and tea, comforting scents that should have felt like home, but only stirred unease. My mother stood at the stove, her back to me. She didn't turn when I stepped in. "Hey, Mom, I'm here," I said softly, trying to ignore the lump in my throat. Her voice was flat, almost dismissive. "Oh, we used your money for Caitlin. She's going through a rough time. Europe will help her. A retreat, spiritual recovery. She needs it." My heart clenched. No cake. No candle. Not even a card. Just another withdrawal from the endless family bank of Emily. And that's when it hit me. It had always been this way. Caitlin was the golden child. The one who made mistakes, cried about them, and was instantly forgiven. She was dramatic, reckless, fragile, always the center of attention. And me? I was the invisible achiever, the straightest student, the polite one, the responsible one, the silent one. When Caitlin maxed out her credit card, I paid her debt. When she crashed her car, I bought her another. When she spiraled into tears and said she didn't want to live, I paid for her therapists, her retreats, her coaches. She bled, and I bandaged. Again and again. But no one ever asked how I felt. That night, my mother handed me a red folder as casually as if she were passing me the electricity bill. "Just some estate papers," she said, almost too lightly. "Sign them when you can." I opened it. Inside were neatly organized documents, power of attorney, notarized forms, banking access. All of it perfectly prepared, too perfectly. Then one invoice caught my eye. $400,000 for laboratory equipment, delivered after my father had already retired. "Mom, was Dad still working?" I asked carefully. She hesitated only a second too long. "He sometimes consulted," she muttered, and quickly changed the subject. I didn't argue. I simply took photos of everything, zipped the files, and sent them to Alan, my lawyer, the one man I trusted to see through illusions. I couldn't sleep that night. My childhood bedroom, once a place of stuffed animals and lavender wallpaper, now felt like a cage. The walls seemed to close in, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. In the morning, Alan called. He was usually calm, deliberate, but now his voice was edged with something I had never heard from him before: fear. "Emily, I reviewed the documents. There are serious problems. First, the signature on the will. The digital verification failed, and the listed witness. He died 3 months before the supposed signing date. My hands tightened around the phone. You mean, Emily, it's forged. Either forged or deliberately backdated. And that's not the worst of it. He paused. My stomach sank. I also requested the toxicology from your father's medical records. There was a drug in his system, clonidine. It slows heart rate. It wasn't prescribed to him. It isn't in his medical file. The world tilted. Could it have been a mistake? I whispered. Only if someone gave it to him without his doctor's knowing, Alan said flatly. Emily, if you didn't authorize those documents, if you didn't know about this, it's not just fraud. It could be criminal. I didn't sleep the next night either. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my old bedroom, my father's ghost pressing in from every shadow. That morning, on my way downstairs, I heard them. My mother and Caitlin whispering in the hallway. She's asking too many questions, Caitlin hissed. We'll say it's stress, burnout, offer her rest, therapy. Dr. Reeves will confirm through one signature and she's in the clinic. Once she's there, no one will doubt the diagnosis. I froze. They weren't just stealing from me. They weren't just trying to erase my name from the inheritance. They were planning to erase me. Entirely. They thought I was still that quiet, obedient girl. They forgot who I had become. I am the woman who built a company from nothing. I am the woman who turned rejection into power. And I was not about to let them write me out of existence. Part 2, you know too much. You might think after discovering the forged will and the poison truth about my father, things couldn't get worse. But that's when they revealed their real faces, and not the ones they wore at funerals, at family dinners, but the ones they had been hiding behind masks of care for years. The very next morning, my mother announced with an unsettling calm, a specialist will be stopping by today, someone who can help you recharge after everything. She used the word recharge as if I were a drained battery, not her daughter. The specialist arrived at 9 sharp. He was everything a textbook psychiatrist should look like: a pressed suit, polished shoes, perfectly shaved, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's rent. His smile was measured, his tone gentle, his performance rehearsed. Emily, I'm Dr. Reeves, may I come in? I gestured toward the chair across from me. Of course, have a seat. He opened his notebook, poised his pen. Your mother and sister are concerned. They tell me you've been under great stress, emotional fatigue, pressure from work. They think a short stay at our clinic would help. I quietly slid my phone out of my pocket, tapped record, and set it on the table between us. And did they also tell you that I never gave consent for a psychiatric evaluation? He faltered. His professional smile twitched. He reached into his briefcase and produced a form. I pressed another button. From my phone came the recording of the one from the hallway, where my mother and Caitlin whispered about faking a diagnosis and locking me away. Dr. Reeves went pale. His composure cracked. This isn't what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like, I cut in. You were ready to sign me away, label me unstable, and confine me. You're part of their machine, a tool they wanted to use to erase me. He packed his briefcase with trembling hands and left without another word. The moment the door shut, I collapsed against the wall. My pulse was racing, my chest tight. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining it. This was real, coordinated, organized. I called Alan. He listened in silence before saying in his steady lawyer's voice, You have enough to act now, but you must be fast. If you hesitate, they will bury you. They've already crossed the line. I believed him, and I knew hesitation could kill me. That evening, I set up a burner email account. I drafted a message, pretending to be a journalist investigating suspicious details in my father's estate, the forged will, and possible medical malpractice. I sent it to Caitlin. 42 minutes later, my inbox flashed. A reply. She was panicking. Words scrambled, sentences half-formed. She begged the journalist not to publish anything. She pleaded insisted it was all misunderstood. But then she made a mistake. Dr. Reeves did everything by the book. Don't make it sound illegal. There it was. Written proof of collusion. Direct acknowledgement that they were manipulating the system. That night, I barely slept. I listened through the thin walls of the old house as they whispered again. She's still resisting. You will wait until Friday. By then, the clinic will be ready. If she won't sign the papers, we'll claim she's delusional. Meanwhile, we'll transfer the assets. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late. I heard my mother's voice, cold and practical. She's a risk to the future. Caitlin answered, she's not family anymore. She's an obstacle. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. They weren't just after money. They weren't just power hungry. They wanted to erase me as if I had never existed. So I struck first. I encrypted every file. I created backups in multiple places, cloud accounts under fake names, USB drives hidden in different bags, encrypted archives emailed to lawyers I trusted. I recorded a video statement where I explained everything: the forged will, the toxicology report, the plot to confine me. I attached audio clips of their conversations, screenshots of Caitlin's frantic email, scans of the documents. Then I sent it all to Alan, to another attorney, and to a journalist I had once helped through a grant. If they wanted to silence me, I would make sure the world heard first. The next morning was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I walked into the kitchen wearing a dress my mother once called too provocative. She froze when she saw me. Caitlin's hand trembled as she stirred her coffee. I smiled. Sat down. So, how are those documents coming along? I hope you won't mind if I have Alan review them, just a formality, of course. Their lips curved into polite smiles, but I saw it in their eyes, fear. That evening, things escalated. I received an official notification from the corporate board. A petition had been filed to suspend me as CEO due to concerns over my psychological stability, supported by testimony from a medical professional and my own mother. This wasn't rumor anymore. This was an official move to cut me out of my own company. I stormed into my mother's room. She sat at the window, gazing into the dark. Her hands were folded neatly, her posture calm. Did you know Caitlin filed for control of my company? I demanded. Silence. Did you help her forge that will? Nothing. Did you give her access to my cloud accounts? Delete my files? Finally, she turned to me. Her eyes weren't guilty, they were tired. But her words cut deeper than any blade. You always made us feel small, Emily, with your money, with your success. You thought we loved you. We were surviving in your shadow. I stared at her like she was a stranger. So yes, I said coldly. You gave her access. She didn't deny it. Later that night I checked. My backups were gone. Emails wiped. The USB drive missing from my bag. But what they didn't know was that I had duplicates. And my journalist contact already had everything. The next morning, I released the second wave. A public file, redacted but detailed enough to tell the story. An official complaint to the police. Media inquiries to the board of directors about whether they condoned suspending a CEO under pressure from her family. By noon, the first headlines appeared. Biotech heirs targeted in psychiatric plot, family accused of forgery and fraud. And just like that, the war was no longer in shadows. Part 3, it's too late to hide. The morning after I went public, the world felt different. Like the air itself had turned to glass, clear, sharp, and cutting. For the first time in years, I wasn't the only witness to what had been happening to me. Strangers knew. Reporters knew. People who had never met my mother or my sister read the words forgery and confinement and saw the shape of our family from the outside. And once the outline existed, you could no longer pretend the picture wasn't there. By 8 a.m., the headlines began to multiply like wasps. One outlet called me the biotech heiress. Another went with CEO daughter. Some chose melodrama, others went clinical. None of them were wrong. Biotech heiress targeted by family and psychiatric plot. The Wolf forgery raises questions in hot state. Clonidine in Toxicology investigators probe possible criminal negligence. A blog that trafficked in scandal posted a grainy photo of Caitlin rolling a suitcase through the front door. A business journal did a timeline graphic of the contract my company had won, the power of attorney I'd refused to sign, the alleged clinic admission scheduled for Friday. A local station interviewed a neighbor who remembered me as the quiet girl who always brought in the mail. By noon, the story had traveled across platforms and time zones. It wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It was a pattern people recognized. Caitlin blinked first. Her suitcase appeared beside the door like a white flag that couldn't decide if it was surrender or retreat. She didn't speak to me. She didn't speak to Mom. She only texted someone, thumbs frantic, jaw clenched, and then a rideshare icon flashed on her phone. By afternoon, she was at the airport. By early evening, someone filmed her at the gate to Rome. In the video, she tried to push past the security officer, then realized her name had just been added to a list. Panic looks different on camera than in real life. In real life, panic is small hands shaking, breath too tight, pupils shrinking. On camera, it becomes theater. She shouted at the gate agent, grabbed for the boarding pass printer, then flung her tote bag at the floor as if the canvas itself had betrayed her, as if fabric could be blamed for gravity. Mom didn't leave her room all day. She didn't cook. Didn't ask if I had eaten. She kept the light off as if electricity itself had chosen sides. When I passed her door, I heard nothing, not even breathing. She could freeze like that for hours, the way a deer freezes because it knows only two strategies, flee or disappear. At 9 p.m., there was a knock at the front door. Not the hesitant kind. The kind that arrives with paperwork. Miss Hart? 2 officers stood on the porch. Their faces were professional, voices plain. They asked if I was willing to answer a few questions concerning my father's death. I told them yes. I would answer all of them. I sat at the dining table that still had a faint ring where my father used to set his coffee mug. I laid out what I had: Alan's notes, the digital analysis on the will, the invoice for the lab equipment after retirement, the recording from the hallway, the email from Caitlin to the journalist, the toxicology report that whispered the word clonidine like it was a secret we were all afraid to say out loud. Finally, I played the audio I had held back, the one from a week earlier, when my mother believed no one was listening and the house believed in secrets. Caitlin wanted it faster, Mom's voice said, thin and steady. He was so tired, he kept saying he didn't want to be a burden. Then the medication, the voice asked herself, or the mirror, I could never be sure. I gave him what he used to take, just more, so it wouldn't hurt. You could hear a glass touch a countertop at the end of the sentence. The smallest sound. The end of a choice. When the clit finished, the officers looked at each other. One wrote something down. The other asked me to email the files to a secured address. I did it while they watched, my fingers steady in a way they hadn't been in days. We'll be in touch, one of them said. It wasn't a threat. It was a hinge opening. 2 days later, I saw my mother under fluorescent lights at the station, a sweater too big for her shoulders, hair pulled back tight like a correction. She looked smaller than the idea of her Venn diagram of the woman who taught me to braid my hair and the woman who had handed me a red folder like it was a grocery list. Did you know Caitlin filed for control of my company? I asked when we were left alone in a grey room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. She didn't answer. Did you help forge Dad's will? Silence again, but not empty. The kind of silence that means the truth has decided it no longer needs to be said. Did you give her my passwords? I asked softer now, not because I wanted to be gentle, but because some part of me still wanted to be wrong. She turned her head. Her eyes were dull with exhaustion, but the line of her mouth was a verdict. "You always made us feel small, Emily," she said. "With your success, with your money, do you think that makes people love you?" I waited for regret, for panic, for any sign that the woman who used to tuck me into bed still existed behind her irises. "What about that?" I asked. "Did he ask you for help, or did you decide it's pain for him?" She looked past me toward the hallway where a copier hummed. "He was tired," she said. "He wanted quiet. I gave him quiet." There are words that reorganize the air in the room. Mercy, murder, love, quiet. You can spend the rest of your life deciding where each one belongs. The charges came a week later, in language that pretends to be neutral but never is. Caitlin, conspiracy, attempted fraud, forgery. My mother, abuse of power of attorney, coercion, possible involvement in bodily harm pending further investigation. The lawyers used words like misunderstanding and grief response. The state used words like pattern and intent. The board of my company convened an emergency meeting. On the screen were squares of faces, colleagues, investors, a PR consultant who had been brought in to manage what everyone insisted on calling optics. I had spent years building something they could all believe in. Now they were looking at me the way people look at the house after a fire, not at the structure, but at the blackened outline of where it used to be. "Emily," said Mr. Grayson, chair of the board, with a voice that tried very hard to sound like empathy, "given the circumstances and the media attention, we think it's prudent to appoint an interim CEO pending the outcome of the investigation." I nodded. I was tired. I was furious. I was something I didn't have a name for yet. "Do what you need to protect the company," I said. "I built it to survive. They will make sure your position is safeguarded," he added quickly, as if titles could cover a wound. Afterward, they asked if I would make a statement to the press. I said I would, but not the kind of statement they expected. We booked a room with too much air and not enough chairs. Reporters stood along the walls holding microphones like needles. Cameras blinked red. My assistant, who had moved through the week like a soldier, set a paper cup of coffee at the podium and squeezed my hand once. I didn't thank anyone. I didn't clear my throat. I set my phone beside the microphone and pressed play. You could hear my mother's words again in just more than in the small sound of glass. The room went still. A reporter shifted his weight. Someone's pen snapped quietly in a back row. "My name is Emily Hart," I said when the clip ended. "I didn't choose this war, but I will finish it, not because I want revenge, because I want other women, other daughters, other quiet achievers to know what it looks like when people who call it love decide that control is easier." I told them what I had already told the police. I told them how you can live your whole life trying to be easy to love and then wake up one day to find out that easy to use is what they had meant all along. I told them about the forged will and the clinic plan, about the cloud passwords and the missing USB drive, about the way wealth makes some people honest and other people hungry. When I finished, no one clapped. Press conferences don't end with applause. They end with more questions. But for a long second, all the questions waited their turn while the shape of the story settled itself in the room. After the press conference, a reporter with a badge from a paper I used to clip articles out of as a teenager caught me by the elevators. He didn't ask for a quote. He said, quietly, my mother signed something she didn't understand after my father died. No one believed her when she tried to undo it. He pressed his card into my hand without looking up, as if eye contact might break whatever pact the moment had made. In the car, I held that card light proof that the story wasn't a monster of my making, but a shadow many people had learned to live beside. The hearings began, because that is what systems do when forced. They grind forward. Caitlin cried in the hallway, then didn't cry in front of the judge. She said she'd been pressured. She said she was fragile. She said she loved me. The judge listened, then pointed to the document she had signed, the emails she had written, the itinerary to Rome that had no return flight, a suspended sentence, mandated counseling, and a lifetime restriction on managing other people's finances. Consequences that sound light on paper and land heavy in a life. My mother didn't cry. She surrendered rights to the estate. She accepted the fine she didn't have the money to pay. She agreed to supervision in a facility that called itself therapeutic and looked like a waiting room that had been stretched into a building. She did not look at me. I had thought, once, that if she were ever in front of a judge, I would feel triumph. I felt nothing that clean. Grief is a mineral. It settles in layers. That night, Alan sent me the preliminary auditor's summary, irregular access logs on the corporate network, an external device connected to my account from the guest Wi-Fi at the house, document timestamps that made no sense unless someone had been preparing my removal for weeks. The neatness of it all angered me more than the mess would have. Someone had drawn straight lines through my life as if simplicity were the same thing as truth. When the interim CEO introduced himself over video me in my kitchen, him in a room with a tasteful abstract painting behind him, he kept saying, "Stabilize. We need to stabilize operations. We need to stabilize investor communications." I said the word back to him and it felt like biting on tinfoil. Stability is not the opposite of courage. Sometimes it's the costume Fia wears to look respectable. On the morning I packed up the house, I found a box of my father's tools in the garage, a level with a bubble that still held steady, a screwdriver with a nick in the handle, a tape measure with the metal end bent out like a tiny, stubborn tongue. I labeled the box "Donate" and then crossed it out and wrote "Keep." There are some objects that carry weight not because of what they are, but because of what your hands do when they lift them. The day I signed the deed over to a real estate agent with kind eyes and an efficient pen, I walked the rooms one more time. In my old bedroom, the lavender wallpaper had faded into something closer to silver. I pressed my palm to the wall where my bed had been and imagined the shape of my childhood under the paint. How many times I had believed the quiet meant peace, when it had only ever meant suppression. In the kitchen, the ring from my father's coffee mug caught the light. I didn't wipe it away. Let the next owner decide what to do with the ring of a man who rose before dawn and cooled his worries in ceramic. When the donation hits cleared, the foundation's bank app displayed numbers I had never seen aligned with the word purpose. I sat with the phone in my lap and cried once, quickly, the way you cough when water goes down the wrong way. Then I called the pro bono coordinator and said, "Hire 2 more attorneys and a part-time investigator who knows how to find paperwork people want to pretend doesn't exist." People wrote to say they were praying for me. People wrote to say they didn't believe me. People wrote to ask if I would look at documents their cousins had made them sign. I answered what I could, forwarded what I couldn't, and learned to stop reading at midnight because after midnight everything looks like proof you are either the hero or the fool of your own story, and the truth lies somewhere harder. One afternoon, a bouquet arrived with no card. The flowers were pale orange roses, the exact color of the ones that had grown along our fence when I was 8. I leaned in to smell them and realized the scent in my memory had always belonged to something else: the cinnamon and tea of the kitchen, the hot wood of the porch, the gasoline on my father's fingers from the moor. Memory forgives, evidence doesn't. I put the roses in water and set them by the window, and when they dropped their petals I didn't sweep them up for days. I let the petals mark the cell like a quiet weather report: storm past, air clearing. I moved into a small apartment with clean walls and a window that faced an elm tree. I bought 2 bowls, 2 plates, 2 mugs, and realized only then that I was done setting the table for people who didn't know how to sit at it. I worked. I slept badly. When I walked past the bakery, I wondered what cake they would have chosen if they'd ever chosen me. I wondered what wish I would have asked a candle for if the people it was supposed to summon actually believed I was worth the breath. 3 months later, a letter arrived with no return address. Not email. Paper folded once, the way you fold truth when you don't know where to put it. I opened it on the porch steps of the apartment building, where the paint had curled at the edges like a held-in sigh. Inside was one line. Sorry we didn't choose you. No signature. No explanation. The handwriting was my mother's, or a very good imitation. The period at the end of the sentence was pressed so hard it had almost torn a hole in the page. I read it 3 times. I felt nothing, then a small, clean anger, then something I hadn't expected, relief. Not because it sounded like remorse. It didn't. It sounded like bookkeeping. It sounded like a receipt finally printed after years of a registered jam. I slid the letter back into the envelope and tucked it into a file with the others. Not evidence. Not keepsake. A map of the country between who I had been and who I refused to stop becoming. That night I stood at the kitchen sink and listened to the refrigerator hum, a sound like a machine reassuring itself that it still works. I thought about the words mercy, murder, and love and quiet and where I had placed each one in the house of my life. I thought about my father and his hands, about my mother and her silences, about my sister and her performance of need. I thought about the people who had written to me and the people who would write tomorrow. It's too late to hide, I thought. Not for me, for them. Par 4, they tried to steal my story. Some betrayals end with a verdict, a headline, a court transcript filed away in the system. But others keep echoing, vibrating through the air long after the doors close. That's what I learned after the trials. My family might have been silenced, but the story wasn't done with me. It had been 3 weeks since the last court session. Caitlin was banned from handling anyone's finances. My mother was under state supervision in a facility that pretended to be therapeutic. And me? I was free. Or at least that was the word people used. Free. What they didn't understand was that freedom can feel hollow when it arrives in the shape of loss. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't toasting champagne over victory. I was sitting in a rented loft in Boston with white walls, a view of the river, and silence that pressed down harder than any chains ever could. The board had installed an interim CEO to stabilize the company. Stabilize. A word they repeated like a prayer, as if it could wash away betrayal, as if it could bury the fact that my own bloodline had tried to erase me. Mr. Grayson, the lead board member, spoke in his careful tone. Emily, this is temporary. Too much media attention, too much emotion. This is business. I smiled, not because I found it funny, but because it was absurd. You know what destroys business, Mr. Grayson? Not emotions, betrayal. For a while, I drifted. I wrote reports I didn't send. I stared at the river until it blurred into glass. I missed someone I used to be, the naive version of me who thought success could earn love, who thought generosity could earn gratitude, who thought birthdays came with cake. That version was gone, and in her place was a woman who finally saw the truth. Giving everything means nothing when you're surrounded by people who only know how to take. Then the call came. It was a journalist from a major magazine. Miss Hart, we'd like to do a feature, your story, the betrayal, the resilience, how you survived. Why me? I asked. Because she said no when everyone expected silence, the editor answered. And so, in November, the magazine hit newsstands. On the cover, my face stared back at me unfiltered. The headline read, Emily Hart, the woman they tried to erase. Inside the pages was my story, stripped of gloss, stripped of exaggeration. No fabricated drama, just the truth. The forged will. The toxicology reports. The psychiatric trap. The silence I broke. The power I reclaimed. The letters started pouring in. Not congratulatory notes, not praise. Confessions. They tried to declare me incompetent so they could take my house. My sister forged my name on our father's trust. My mother said my brother was more important because he was fragile, but I mattered too. Hundreds of letters. From women, from men, from the elderly, from teenagers. They weren't just writing to me, they were writing to themselves through me, giving shape to betrayals they had buried for years. And I realized this wasn't about me anymore. This was bigger. I invested the money from selling the house into my foundation. What had started as a personal project became something else entirely, a movement. We hired lawyers who specialized in probate and guardianship law. We brought in psychologists who could testify against fabricated diagnoses. We partnered with journalists unafraid to dig into family disputes that were really patterns of coercion and theft. We created the country's first hotline for people facing coerced incompetence claims. Calls came from every state, every day. Then came the letter that changed everything. A plain envelope, no return address. Inside, a court petition filed in Maine. The petitioner, Lucy Gray. The proposed guardian, her own mother. The accusation? That Lucy was emotionally unstable after her father's death. Attached were medical evaluations signed by a doctor whose license had been revoked a year earlier and who had, in fact, died. And at the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note from Lucy herself. I saw your interview. Please, help me. I'm not crazy. I'm just inconvenient. My blood ran cold. Because I knew this playbook. It was mine. Different names, same script. 2 days later, I was in Maine. The courthouse was small, beige, and smelled of old paper. The coffee shop across the street sold bitter coffee in paper cups that collapsed in your hand if you squeezed too tight. And in the hallway outside the courtroom sat a girl in a hoodie, her eyes darting with fear. "Are you really Emily Hart?" she asked when I introduced myself. "Not the one from TV," I said. "The one who survived this. Now it's your turn." We combed through her documents. I called one of our foundation lawyers to join us. Together, we found the same pattern I'd lived: forged signatures, fabricated medical records, bank transfers already moving money from Lucy's inheritance into her mother's accounts. In court, her mother spoke first. "My daughter is unstable. She sees conspiracies. She has dreams. She refuses therapy." The judge raised a brow. "Do you have a licensed physician's report?" She handed over a file. The judge scanned the page, then looked up. "Dr. Wesley, he's been deceased for 12 months. Silence fell heavy. The case collapsed in under an hour. Lucy was reinstated as fully competent. Her mother was sanctioned, stripped of authority, warned by the court. Later that evening, Lucy and I sat in her kitchen drinking tea. She was quiet for a long time before she whispered, "They're afraid of you." I frowned. "Why?" "Because you survived, and you told the world." When I returned home, a package was waiting at my door. Inside was a photograph, me and my father under the old tree where Caitlin and I had carved our initials. He was carrying me on his shoulders, and I was laughing at the sky like it belonged to me. On the back, in shaky handwriting, "You did the right thing, Dad." I sat on the porch with my dog curled against my legs. The breeze stirred the pines, the lake whispered against the shore, and for the first time in years, silence didn't feel like erasure. It felt like something I had chosen. Part 5. Now I am the fear. They wanted me gone. Forgotten. Rewritten. They wanted me erased like a typo in their story. But instead, I became the one thing they never expected, the voice that refused to stay silent. It has been a year since the courtrooms, the hearings, the cameras. A year since my mother's silence became louder than any confession, since Caitlin tried to escape through an airport gate. A year since the world first learned the word clonidine in connection with my father's name. And I am still here. I live in Vermont now, in a cabin near the lake. The air smells of pine and wood smoke, of mornings that belong only to me. The house is quiet, but not with the suffocating quiet of my childhood bedroom. This quiet is chosen. Earned. Every day begins the same, coffee black. Dog at my feet, the lake shifting outside the window. And letters. Always letters. Not emails, paper letters, written in shaky penmanship or cramped block letters, sometimes on lined notebook paper, sometimes on expensive stationery from people who still believe that money makes words matter more. They come from women abandoned by their siblings, from men declared unstable by wives who wanted the house, from sons and daughters who were gaslit into doubting their sanity because the truth was inconvenient for their families. My husband called me hysterical to steal the business I built. My son forged a doctor's note to put me in a care facility against my will. My sister tried to have me declared incompetent to sell our parents' land. Every letter bleeds the same ink. You showed me I am not crazy. I am not alone. The foundation has grown. What began as one lawyer and one shaky idea has become a network. We train attorneys in how to spot forged documents. We partner with universities to research legal gaslighting. We fund journalists who refuse to file family betrayal under domestic dispute and bury it in the back pages. We created protocols for whistleblowers inside families, a handbook of survival filled with the lessons my own bloodline forced me to learn. And yet, with every victory, I feel the same echo. They wanted me silent. Instead, they made me louder. Lucy Gray was just one. There were dozens more after her. Each case different in detail but identical in structure. Someone inconvenient. Someone silenced. Someone almost erased. The courts began to notice. Judges began to hesitate before rubber-stamping guardianships. Reporters began to call us for comment. And my name and the name they tried to destroy became shorthand for resistance. I travel sometimes now giving speeches. Not about biotech, not about contracts. About betrayal. About the weaponization of concern. About how love can be twisted into a scalpel sharp enough to cut your name out of existence. At the end of each talk, I repeat the same words, because they are truer than anything else I know. They didn't choose me, but I chose myself, and I will never stop choosing those like me. People stand. Some cry. Some sit still, staring at their hands, realizing perhaps for the first time that their story has a name, too. Sometimes, late at night, I dream of my father. In the dreams, he isn't weak or tired or pleading for silence. He's smiling. He's carrying me on his shoulders under the tree with our carved initials. He tells me he is proud. He tells me I do not need to save everyone. But when I wake, I still try. One afternoon, I came home to find a small box on my porch. No sender, no label. Inside was the same photograph I had already received once of my father and me, the tree, the laughter frozen in a square of time. But this time, the handwriting on the back was different. You always knew how to fight, Dad. The letters were shaky, but I recognized the hand. Not his. Ours. My mother's. It didn't matter. Real or forged, it told me what I already knew. They were afraid. Afraid of me. Afraid of the truth. Afraid of what happens when the quiet one stops being quiet. Because I am not just a survivor. I am not just the invisible daughter who became a CEO. I am not just the woman they tried to erase. I am the reason they hesitate now. I am the shadow over forged signatures. I am the voice behind every daughter who whispers, I am not crazy. I am the fear that keeps them awake at night. They wanted me erased. Now I am the reason erasers break in their hands. That's the end of today's story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so share them in the comments below. I truly enjoy reading what you have to say. If you'd like more, check out the full playlist linked in the description of this video. New real stories are on the way, and I'd love to share them with you. Hopefully, I'll see you next time. If this journey resonated with you, please hit subscribe and tap the bell so you'll never miss the latest stories. Thank you for listening.